What's up, guys? So we're well into 2020, and for me personally, I am joining a local cover band, and hopefully we'll get to play a few shows this year, but most likely towards the latter half of the year. I've also got a couple music projects on my plate, and it's more than I can handle right now, and I'll probably have to pick and choose what I'm actually going to work on top of all of the band stuff. But the reason I'm here today is because I wanted to do this video and just do a walkthrough of all the gear that I use here in my studio, as well as for recording and soon to be live setup, I think. So we're going to look at all the guitars that I use. I pretty much use three main guitars. I only have one bass guitar. I have this Midi controller right here, and I have an amp setup, which I'll spend a little bit of time walking through what it is, what the settings are, and how I use it for recording. And this particular amp setup is what I used for recording my last project, and I was really happy with how the tone came out. Finding that right tone when it comes to guitar, especially metal guitar, can be a lifelong journey, but at least I think I found a pretty happy medium with what I have set up right now. So why don't we go through all of that first, and then we'll just do a demo of how I got the tone that I got, and then I'll share the rest of my stuff. All right, amp and mic setup, as well as effects. So there's also a cat. This is the Revv Generator 120, which is a killer amp. I ordered this at the end of 2018. It was the day before Christmas, and I didn't get it until 5 or 6 months later. They have a pretty backed up waiting list for this, and that doesn't really matter because it was worth the wait. This thing it's extremely versatile. Obviously, I'm a metalhead, so I'm using it mostly for metal tones, but has some very nice, bright, clean tones and a good crunch channel. So yeah, there's 4 channels. Channel 1 is clean. Channel 2, crunch. Channel 3 is pretty much high gain rhythm, and then channel 4 is high gain lead. So there's also lots of other bells and whistles on it, which is pretty much worth its own video if I really wanted to go into it. But that's the gist of it. And then after I got that amp, I got this Mesa 2x12 cab. It's got vintage 30 speakers in it. Sounds awesome. And I guess I'll explain the mics since those are here. On the left, I have just your regular old SM57, which is placed about halfway between the center of the speaker and the edge of the speaker. And then I have an Audix D2, which you could use for a tom mic, but here I'm using it for guitars. And it's almost dead center down the center of the second speaker. So when I go to demonstrating how I get my recorded rhythm tone, you'll see how that all comes into play. Next, I have the Line 6 Pod HD500X, and this pedal has been on the market for a while. I'd say at least 10 years, and I had it maybe I think I've had it for maybe about 5 or 6 years. And I knew pretty much when I got it that I was only using maybe 30 to 40% of its overall potential. It's got a lot of options, and it's got quite a bit of a learning curve, but if you spend some time playing with it, it works very well. I know Pod's flagship product these days is probably the Helix in terms of multi-effects pedals, but as far as this one goes, it gets the job done. I've used this in a couple live settings just for jams, not for any shows, but hopefully soon. So the other thing you can do with this, and actually let me take a step back. You can see I've got a bunch of cables going in and out. I'm using the 4-cable method to hook into my amp, so that way I can combine effects before the amp, and then also after the amps. I also have a John Petrucci wah pedal, which actually it's right over there, and I'm really good at cable management, by the way. I don't have it hooked up right now, but I could have that sit right at the very beginning of my effects chain, go into the amp, and then through the send and return of the amp, through the remainder of the cables, have some an effects loop where I'll put things like flanger, delayed, reverb, chorus, etc. But the other thing that is really nice about this is it has a MIDI out and the amp has a MIDI in. So it took a little while of reading both of the manuals, but when you have it hooked up right, you can basically use this as a foot switch
to change the channels on the amp. So I probably can't step back far enough to be able to show how this works in real time. But if I hit the second foot switch here, that switches to my lead channel on the Revv. And then if I go here to my third foot switch, that goes to the clean channel. And then the first channel, which is where I started with, is our rhythm channel. So it's pretty slick. All right, so the first guitar I have here is something that I got pretty recently, as of last year. It's an Ibanez RG7 string, and I'm not going to go into it in depth because I kind of already did that in another video. So if you just check out the link above or down below, you'll know all about it. So what I'm using here, as I demonstrated on the amp side, right here we have this mixer, and for this particular input, we have the SM57, which is on the left speaker of my cabinet, and then on the right side, I have the Audix D2 going into this other channel. Now, this particular mixer, it's a Behringer mixer, and Behringer makes pretty awesome mixers. This one was not particularly expensive. I mean, I think it was like $50 or $60. Unfortunately, it didn't come with an AC adapter, so I had to buy that separately. But it really gets the job done. And for a setup like this, you don't need something super expensive. It's got effects on it and stuff, but I don't really mess with those. I might find some use for that at another time. But basically, the way this works is I have my two mics going in as inputs, and then I'll use the volume on each channel here and just basically blend the two mics together. And once I feel like I have a tone that I'm happy with, then that's what I go with. And then that goes out right here and into my audio interface, which goes into my DAW, which is Reaper. And that's what I used for recording pretty much all of the rhythm guitar and even lead guitar too on the last project that I did. So I'm going to turn up the SM57 volume just a little bit here, just a little bit at a time. And my personal preference is I like it at about 9 o'clock. But of course, if you do this yourself, everything is going to vary pretty widely. And then I'll bring in the D2. So this is a little bit brighter. You'll kind of get more high end out of the mic placement in this particular mic. And that's just kind of where I prefer things. So let's do some crunch. So next up I have this Jackson. This is the third guitar I've ever owned, and I usually use it for like second lead when I'm doing my own recording. And these days I don't really touch it that much, but it has a floating bridge on it when I basically want to do cool stuff with the whammy bar. So basically anything like this. That's always super fun to play with. All right, up next is my Ibanez Acoustic, and I've had this one for a while too, and it's served me very well until this day. I've used this pretty recently in my recordings, and it still sounds awesome. I think really just the key is just keeping clean strings on it, and pretty much just any acoustic guitar in general, just to kind of get that like some really good brightness so that it sits well in whatever mix you're working on. All right, here's my bass, which is a Peavey grind. I don't know the model number, but I got this off of probably the most reputable dealer that anybody knows, some guy off Craigslist. And at first, I wasn't sure what to make of it because I'm not even a bass player. But once I got some basic technique down and I heard this for the first time in a mix on my first project, I was really impressed. And this is all I've been using for the past, I'd say, 3 years. I may go for another bass depending on just on what my taste is, but we'll see. So I don't have a bass amp, head, cab. I don't have any of that stuff. I do want to get that eventually, but when it comes to recording, all I do is I just plug this directly using a DI box, which goes into my audio interface and into Reaper, and then I'll just blend that direct signal with a distorted signal with a plugin. So the plugin I'm using today is Neural DSP's Dark Glass B7K Ultra, and it sounds absolutely awesome. And it's probably going to be my go-to for a good while. All right, really quick, we'll just kind of go through the particular MIDI controller that I use. This is an Alesis V49, and it pretty much gets the job done. I am not a piano or a keyboard player, so, and I'll admit, when it comes to working on my own projects, I will sometimes, if whatever I'm playing is not super complicated, I'll record and play it live. But if it's something really technical or just something out of my reach, I will just defer to just doing MIDI programming. All right, so that's most of my core gear. There's a lot of other little things that I have in here, like a DI box, a reamper, the audio interface I use, which is going to be swapped out for something else pretty soon. But I think you kind of get the gist of what I use for all my projects, and hopefully a live setup soon. So let me know if you have any questions down in the comments. I'd be glad to answer. But otherwise, just stay tuned. I'll be sharing some things on and off this year as I work on projects and play with the band. So see you guys next time.